Surface adventurers across the Forgotten Realms swap tavern tales of rampaging orcs, goblin raiding parties, and maybe a descent into crypts of the undead if they're feeling particularly edgy. But most haven't even sniffed the Underdark. The Underdark is the forgotten world below our world, and within its depths reside nearly 100 known creatures and monster types. But you already know of the brain-vivisecting mind flayers, the dream dealers of tyranny called beholders, and the insane-in-the-membrane distant dwarven cousins, the Darrow. Tonight, we go deeper, far deeper. Beyond the many known terrors of the night below lie creatures of such obscurity they exist on the fringes between myth and nightmare. Creatures so rare that even seasoned dungeon explorers and veteran lore masters are likely to scratch their head in bewilderment at their very mention. This is the top 5 most obscure creatures of the Underdark. Well, 5-ish. We'll get to the ish in a moment. I've sifted through a library's worth of bestiaries and inhaled enough fungal spores to blame hallucination in the comments when you disagree with my findings, all to bring you this curated descent into madness. To rank these phantoms of the deep earth, we're using rigorously unsound methodology based on 3 pillars of pure, unadulterated guesswork and singular opinion. First, scarcity, in-game rarity, as in, how likely am I to get eaten by one of these on my expedition rare? Second, obscurity. For most of these, we can forget the monster manuals. We're digging into the deep lore, from rumors and half-remembered anecdotes to torn pages from the journals of long-dead explorers. Obscure creature lore so hidden, it might as well be put on an endangered list. And finally, the X factor, a counterbalance. How unique is the creature? How compelling is the lore, be it their biology, abilities, or the implications of their existence? Besides, a good backstory can go a long way. And if you stick around to the end, I'll share my honorable mention, a creature I simply couldn't leave out. I'm certain at the conclusion of this exploration, at least one of these forgotten creatures, and perhaps quite a few more, will be a new discovery to the vast majority of you. And if you're lucky, you'll live long enough to add them to your own future adventures and worlds. So with that cheery thought in mind, buckle up. We're going spelunking in the deepest reaches of the night below. And statistically speaking, at least one of you isn't coming back with all your marbles, or limbs for that matter. Let's begin. If you have followed the channel's Expedition Underdark series, links below if you have not, then you already well know the alien powers that begin to take hold of the living once you descend past the 10-mile marker of the Underdark, a proverbial demarcation where the edges of reality begin to fray, notifying that you have crossed past the dangers of the Middle Dark and into the existential dread that is the unknowable Lower Dark. At those immense depths, dark energies begin to manifest, growing stronger and more tangible the deeper you go, to twist the form and nature of the creatures that dwell there, even birthing entirely new horrors. While these powerful forces are not well understood, most scholars with expertise in the various outer planes, unknown dimensions, and other worlds and realities all do tend to agree that some form of alien intrusion is responsible. Amid this maelstrom of cosmic creation, there is one unmistakable pattern that emerges with enough consistency as to not be random, and we can use this tendency as an early clue in our search for its origins. And that is the fact that the overwhelming majority of these mutations and newly created horrors are of the classification we mortals call aberrations. Twisted forms that often violate natural laws and abandon principles of evolution. This fact alone is strong, albeit circumstantial evidence that the Far Realm both holds influence in the Lower Dark and is likely involved in these mysteries, at least on some level. And there is likely no better example of this cosmic level of miscreation than the first of our profiled creatures, ranked at number 5, the Annihilator. At first glance, this creature resembles something familiar, yet exotic. and you get the feeling you may have seen this before, but you can't quite place it. The hunched insectoid frame, the thick armored scales, clawed limbs, and those twitching antennae. Your memories want to remind you this looks strangely like the rust monsters that you have killed by the dozens in your youth with no more than a broken nail or maybe a lost sword or shield. However, your big brain logic refuses to accept this thought, and for good reason. Rust monsters are pathetic, never growing larger than 3 or 4 feet long, but this thing before you must be twice, maybe 3 times that size. Not to mention, you're in the lower dark. Rust monsters wouldn't stand a chance here. Your brain is right to reject this notion and put you on guard because the Annihilator has zero intention of rusting your sword or shield. The Annihilator doesn't kill as much as it simply unmakes. Its antennae won't corrode metal. They do not damage anything. They just erase. Touch them and your sword does not rust, it just disintegrates. It ceases to be. Your armor gone as though it were never forged, dust in the wind. And if those antennae brush against your soft, supple flesh, well, in the vein of silver linings and all, no bloody wounds, just gone before your synapses even register the loss. One moment, flesh and bone. The next, another vacancy in the universe. At least you'll feel no pain, I think. I mean, I don't know anyone that's been resurrected after disintegration, but then again, I'm not a cleric, and I probably wouldn't spend a true resurrection or a wish spell on someone who tried to pet one of these things anyway. But hey, your mileage may vary. The Annihilator is a betrayal of natural evolution, a thing that should not exist, and yet there it is, carving holes in the world wherever it passes, living or not. As if an elder evil decided to take a rust monster, bypass evolution, and then release it into the Underdark, just to see what happens. While a creature's deadliness is not important to this list of lore obscurity, it should darn well be important to your survivability. So I feel obligated to point out, for your own safety of course, that my mentioning of the Annihilator as an empowered form of that meager rust monster was in no way meant to downplay the danger of the Annihilator. So let me remind you that the rust monster, a challenge rating 1/2 creature both in the 3rd and 5th edition texts, pales in comparison to the Annihilator and its 3rd edition CR of 15. We're not just talking apples and oranges here, more like comparing a tabby cat to a tiger. Now, for you 5e scholars, the act of 3.5 to 5th edition conversion is nebulous at best, and depending upon which method chosen, you'll land with a challenge rating for the Annihilator somewhere between 11 and 13, which is, at worst, still over 20 times that of the rust monster. So you're looking at a potentially far realm twisted version of that 20-something hit point creature, best known for being target practice, that is now on par with an adult white dragon or ice devil from the 9 hells, approaching almost 200 hit points. Hopefully you let that sink in. Annihilators have a much cooler name for a reason. They are deadly. They move and strike in silence, its dark form of deep, almost black violets and blues, blending perfectly with the light-absorbing stone that makes up their habitat. They slither through the deep recesses of the lower dark, leaving no mark, no trail. And they are the tidiest of predators, leaving nothing behind, no mess, no blood, no remains, no bones. Even the victim's gear, from weapons to the random canteen, gone. Annihilated, if you will, consumed as nourishment for a creature born of unknown alien energies. It is not known how or even if Annihilators reproduce. They're on a list of obscure creatures for a reason. However, the few surviving first-hand accounts do seem to indicate they stalk as a solitary creature, so there's that, I guess. But we will leave the Annihilator with one harrowing fact you should always remember, a constant theme across every known sighting of this Underdark creature. They are, in a word, relentless. It is said that once an Annihilator selects its target, it then becomes obsessed with its disintegration, and they have been known to pursue their prey over great distances. One surviving account from the long-collapsed shield dwarf kingdom of Torglor tells of a small 6-person expedition that was tracked and hunted by a single annihilator from the northern reaches of the Deep Wastes over 1,000 miles south past the Glimmer Sea and into Old Shanatar, killing, disintegrating all but one. Only found centuries later when a group of Githyanki settled Gacharoth amid those same dwarven ruins of Torglor was this account found, and this consistent tale of obsession and endless pursuit should always be top of mind when exploring the Lower Dark. Remember the Annihilator, the Far Realm's little cosmic joke. Turns out evolution can go very wrong with the aid and influence of Elder Evils. Our number 4 obscure Underdark monster was born in the twilight of a Netherese empire that thought itself untouchable, forged from powerful magic, elemental earth, and the desperation of a civilization that teetered on the brink. They were supposed to save an empire, built to protect their creators from the highly intelligent and deeply malicious masters of magic called the Farum. Instead, they became something else, something determined and unrelenting. They became hunters. Their masters called them the Thalud, but most know them today as tomb tappers. Now, initially I had left these gruesome flesh-like constructs off this list. While they are certainly rare, there are still far more obscure creatures of the Underdark that could easily be argued more deserving based on obscurity in the lore alone. The Mosgriken, the Ushalan, the Lythe, the Stoneflyer, and yes, the very creatures the Tomb Tappers were created to defeat, the Farum. Each arguably more rare and unquestionably more obscure. After all, the Tomb Tapper has made an appearance in the modern texts of 5e, updated as a challenge rating 10 construct in the Rime of the Frost Maiden adventure. In fact, they're the only rare Underdark creature we're profiling today that has made it to the 5th edition. So how were the Tomb Tappers able to crack the top 5? Well, they're just kind of awesome. They have a great backstory and are so viscerally unique. Just look at these things. And it was your votes that made it official, winning poll 250 easily with just under 40% of votes that have now eclipsed over 400 at the time of this recording. Not to mention they have a ton of history, having been introduced by Mr. Ed Greenwood himself in Dragon Magazine number 41, all the way back in 1980. Created during the height of Netheril, that arcane empire of sky cities that was both built and subsequently destroyed by human archmages with far more power and hubris than humility or common sense. Tomb Tappers are vestiges of a time when Netheril ruled the skies above and around the Anauroch Desert. However, the Empire's arcanist soon discovered a problem. Someone or something was draining their magic, sapping their power, and they didn't know how or why. It was the Farum, aberrations of immense spellcasting power that sought only to destroy. As the Farum began their magical assault on the Empire, the Netherese archwizards sought and devised a countermeasure. Their solution? To design and build a specialized type of soldier for an arcane-seeking army. Each Tomb Tapper created from the bodies of 9 volunteers, 9 citizens from the slums of Netheril, chosen to be gaslit into being ascended into something more, for a greater purpose. Fused with elemental earth, gifted with an insatiable hunger to hunt for magic, and given only a single command: find the source of these nefarious magical thieves and end them permanently. The result? A 15-foot tall construct of smooth blue-gray flesh, fingers long enough to wrap completely around a human skull. They have no eyes, no ears, no nose. They don't need one. They don't see or sense the world as you or I do. In fact, they have no face whatsoever. But they do have a mouth. Just look down, you can't miss it. And it's hard not to stare once you see it. It's astounding, really. Almost as much as it is terrifying. There, in the belly, a gaping, oversized maw lined with teeth that can pulverize granite. You see, this is what happens when wizards try to play God. This is what desperation looks like when it's given form and purpose and then sent underground to hunt these faceless ones, these tomb tappers. Here's what you need to know. They're not natural. Nothing about them is natural. What they want, what they've always wanted, is magic. They're obsessed with it. Tomb tappers believe there's a source of all magic hidden under Toril, somewhere deep in the Underdark, and they've spent millennia searching for it. They follow the pulse of magic through the darkened stone. When they find it, they take it. From tombs, from vaults, from ruins, even from the still warm hands of those holding it. It doesn't matter. Magic belongs to them. And every magic item they find, they hoard. Not to use. No, they never use the magic they collect, but to venerate it, to protect it, to, in many ways, worship it. Think of them as among the most dangerous of archaeologists anywhere in the multiverse. Yet they don't track their quarry or anyone standing in their way through eyes or scent or even touch. Despite missing these senses, you can't hide from them. They see through sonar, kind of like bats. Yes, silent spells are their kryptonite, but good luck getting close enough to cast. You can't charm them, you can't scare them, and you definitely cannot reason with them. They communicate through skin vibrations and a form of telepathy, but far more often than not, they're not interested in any type of conversation. Tomb tappers possess claws capable of tunneling through solid bedrock, tirelessly excavating stone in their pursuit, and they are always seen carrying an oversized 10-foot-long hammer made of aeronite, a heavy magma alloy harder than most rock. And when they strike, they do not hesitate, and they do not relent. That said, it might surprise you to know that even though the tomb tappers have all the trappings and characteristics to make them right at home in any undead necropolis or unholy hellscape, they are in fact lawful neutral by design. Against every warning sign their appearance will set off in your mind, tomb tappers are not marauding killers. They are selective. You see, a tomb tapper retains all the memories of its ancestors, and so they continue following the echoes of their first command, long after the war they were created for has ended, yet still adhering to the design and programming of their long-dead creators, to seek and collect magic items and artifacts and slay any non-human spellcasters. It is long known through many first-hand accounts that tomb tappers do not attack dwarves or deep gnomes unless they're provoked, and in some rare instances, they've even been known to aid them. But drow, duergar, mind flayers, they remember those races, and not fondly. They remember the centuries of betrayal, the despair, the battles fought in the deep places, and they do not forgive. They never will. Curiously, one oddity the tomb tappers seem to have picked up over the centuries is an almost compulsive drive to amuse themselves, and they do so by molding the rock around them into their own form of art. Walk through a darkened tunnel and notice something out of place, something strange, maybe a spiral pattern carved into the walls, organic-looking arches that seem to pulse in your torchlight. That just might be the work of a tomb tapper. So why are the tomb tappers ranked fourth on our list of obscure Underdark denizens? Why are they so rare? Because they were never meant to last. Most of them died doing exactly what they were created to do, fighting the Farum. When that war ended, when Netheril fell, the tomb tappers lost their masters. The great floating cities collapsed, their arcane creators reduced to myth and dust. But the Thalud, they remember. They still remember. They always will. Their numbers were never large to begin with, and their reproduction remains among one of the great mysteries in Realms lore. No one has ever seen a young Thalud. No one has ever witnessed them giving birth or mating. Yet somehow they persist. There are rumors of a central tomb tapper vault far beneath Honor Rock, somewhere in the deepest reaches of the Lower Dark, well past the reach of the most daring of explorers. They simply call it the tomb. All those collected artifacts over all those centuries, the sum of endless searching, the found, acquired, or taken magic that has to be stored somewhere. A place where the tomb tappers can worship its arcane auras. A vault unfound, untouched, and almost assuredly fiercely guarded. But no one who's ever searched for it has ever returned. We will look deeper into the Tomb Tapper tomb, attempt to uncover some of its hidden lore as we continue our Expedition Underdark series, so if that sort of exploration is of any interest to you, then feel free to check out the links below. Now, what you may not know about the Tomb Tapper is when it dies, its body permanently turns to stone. Maybe. There are theories that state this petrification might only be a form of suspended animation, and that under the right circumstances, these potentially not really dead tomb tappers might just reawaken. Tomb tappers are indeed every bit the archaeologists of the Netherese apocalypse, proof that even lawful neutral beings can still be profoundly disturbing. Tomb tappers are what happens when wizards try to solve problems with more problems, and then a dash of body horror. And they're still down there, hunting, for magic, for purpose, for something. Probably best not to ask though, just play it safe and leave your artifacts at home. Just to be clear, the Denzelian coming in at number 3 on our list are not a famous actor's answer to the Swifties, but they are perhaps the most unique creature you will find in the Underdark or anywhere on Toril for that matter. They are so unique, in fact, that for many years there was debate on if the Denzelians were in fact living creatures at all. The tomb tappers we just profiled made this list for their incredible lore and stunning visual conception while also being quite rare. And the Annihilators came in at rank 5 on the strength of their deadly biology, deep lower dark origins, and their own deadly visage of what a far realm-fueled rust monster might actually look like, while arguably being even more obscure and rare. But the Denzelians are not getting on any list because of their looks. Yet there is no way any proper, well-researched ranking of the Underdark's rare and obscure could cast this creature aside, as they are the textbook example of both. So what are they? Scholars have only guesses. Where did they come from? No one has a clue. How do you find one? You probably won't. There are literally dozens of nightmares across the Underdark. Cosmic horrors sculpted by psionic madness and experiments, apex predators bred to hunt down the living, even monstrosities spawned from the rotting subconscious of long-forgotten gods. And then there is the Denzelian, a big, flat rock. The Denzelians first appeared in the first edition Fiend Folio from 1981, putting its lore within 12 months of being the oldest on this list. These sentient rocks would later make appearances in 1992's monstrous Compendium Fiend Folio Appendix for the 2nd edition AD&D, The Secrets of the Lamp in 93, and Demi-Humans of the Realms for 2nd edition in 1999, along with a few mentions in magazines, most notably in Polyhedron number 126 back in 1997. But the Denzelian has not made an appearance since, or this century, placing them squarely at the top in terms of obscurity as one of the most bizarre species in the Underdark's ecosystem. If this list were 100% based on rarity and obscurity, and maybe the oddity of a creature's name, the Denzelian would be the unchallenged number 1. It is, after all, just a rock, but one that lives. A long, flat sheet of acid-secreting, slow, torpid-moving, mostly peaceful rock, but one that we believe thinks. Denzelians are believed to be about 10 foot wide and less than a foot thick in their natural form. The one trait that does help identify them is the Denzelian's rock-like surface. It looks just like an ordinary stone surface, each varying in shifting hues depending upon what minerals it has recently absorbed: gray, brown, or the occasional ochre if it's been gorging on iron deposits, for example. To the untrained eye, it appears indistinguishable from natural stone, lying motionless for weeks or months at a time, blending into its environment with a level of absolute perfection that would earn a tip of the hat from any chameleon or cephalopod. But upon touching the Denzelian, that surface, which is actually their skin, is a bit smooth and slightly pliable, almost flexible. Denzelians are composed of a very rich variety of absorbed materials that include deposits of almost pure carbon, sulfur, magnesium, and more that make them indigestible to any known animals. Some of these deposits form into gemstones, and on rare occasions, one might even find various precious gems, from sapphires to diamonds, inside of them. This is the rarest living being you will find, or not find, in the Underdark, and yet it is not one that will stalk you from the shadows. It's one you will walk past or upon without even realizing it was there. That is, until it moves. Your eyes will tell you it's a trick of the dim bioluminescent light surrounding you. But no, these rocks can roll. Okay, they don't actually roll, but it's the only low-effort dad joke that I had equipped. The Denzelians glide at a glacial pace, their entire bodies undulating in a slow, barely detectable ripple, and they can change their shape to a degree, the primary reason for their flexible skin. They possess the ability to flatten themselves ever so thin to allow the Denzelian to squeeze through otherwise impossibly tight crevices or even slither up sheer walls, their acid-secreting bodies carving a silent path through the rock. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention that they can be a bit more deadly than just any plain old rock. The first of their defenses keeps them off the dietary lists of any known predator. At will, the Denzelian can exude a repulsive smell with their acid secretion that makes them a very unattractive and, as I mentioned, undigestible meal. This acid also has the added mechanism of its gritty fumes rising into the air, getting into the eyes, nose, and mouth of any creature within 10 feet or 3 meters, and paralyzing their senses. When forced to defend itself, Denzelians will not hesitate to go on the offensive against their aggressors. Their primary combat tactic is to simply rush toward their enemy, although the Denzelian's form of rushing would make a gelatinous cube look like a fey quickling. Regardless, the Denzelians will attempt to trip any aggressor, forcing the enemy to fall upon their acid-secreting body. That said, Denzelians are generally rather peaceful and non-aggressive. However, they will protect themselves vigorously and go to great lengths to drive off or kill anyone that threatens their young. That's right, they breed. But don't ask how. I don't know, and scholars have only speculated, and I'm not sure I want to know. But it does segue us nicely to the most fascinating aspect of the Denzelian, at least in my humble opinion, its biology and life cycle. Male and female Denzelians are indistinguishable from one another, and they are estimated to have a lifespan that can breach a single millennia. And while they are rather solitary creatures, they will travel in male and female pairs, at least until the female can create her offspring. This is most important because according to the limited knowledge shared by Realms biologists of the first edition lore, the female will only ovulate a single time in that 1,000 years. One shot to propagate their species. Talk about performance anxiety. Female Denzelians will then lay anywhere from 3 to 12 eggs, which resemble fist-sized faceted gemstones. In particular, they appear as smoky quartz with a milky white liquid center that is the Denzelian embryo. The female will then place her eggs hidden in the environment over a 100-yard spread. Now, there exists some debate on this biological lore. The first edition texts were pretty clear in their insistence that Denzelian eggs would require over a century before hatching to produce their young. However, later accounts from the second edition have suggested that upon further examination and research, that these eggs would hatch after only a single year. Either way, the absurdity of their reproductive cycle is one of the primary reasons why the Denzelians are not just rare, but in actuality they are mythically rare. They are the ultimate paradox of the Underdark, immensely rare, yet theoretically they're everywhere. And for all the horrors that lurk in the darkness, it is strangely poetic that the rarest of them all is not a nightmare, a far realm horror, or a gruesome abomination, but instead a simple, peaceful wanderer. That alone makes them worthy of this listing in my opinion. Just don't mistake one for a stepping stone during your travels. Our runner-up Deep Underdark rarity was a tough research, as very little is known, and what I did find initially made me wonder if the juice was worth the squeeze. But the truth is, that difficulty only bolsters the justification for its placement and to dig a little deeper and mine what lore there is. You're not finding the Tisic in your monster manuals or common bestiaries. With only two primary canonical sources found, a 2nd edition AD&D adventure called A Darkness Gathering, and the Psionic Handbook for 3rd edition, the Tisic is another de facto example of the obscure. After savoring our leisurely study of the peaceful Denzelian at rank 3, we are once again confronted with the reality that is the natural state of the Underdark's deepest reaches, horror and existential dread. The Tisic begins its terrible existence from the psionic labs and experiments of the Illithid knowledge masters deep in the mind flayers city of Orendal in the lower dark. Able to manipulate the mind in ways unknown to surface science, they start by extracting the repressed memories and neurosis from the subconscious thoughts of their captive subjects. These subjects, usually thralls already in their servitude, undergo the Illithid's grisly version of neuroscience, where the mind flayers somehow mutate and embody those fragmented psionic energies into the birth of a new living creature of terrible potential. The resulting abomination takes the form of a 10-foot-tall, bloated and distorted reflection of the person from whom its genesis emerged. Its flesh is marred by frost-like textures that hint at its cold aura ability, and its eyes are empty pits of anger and agony. In addition, this creature gains aberrant horror traits worthy of any Lovecraftian novel, from twisted facial features, misshapen and asymmetrical horns, tentacles, you name it. In fact, no two Tisics will look alike, but each will carry its own signature and gruesome disfigurements. The Tisic is one of the truest and most literal manifestations of what happens when your worst nightmares find form. In this way, it is less a creature in the conventional sense, a being that finds the juxtaposition of two diametrically opposed states, existing as an intentional mistake. The most unnatural of beings on this list, the Tisic is a form that the living was simply never meant to take. Still, here it is, and from the moment of its unholy birth, it is hungry. Tisic are born in torment, the residue of the creation process and their own damaged mind, as they instinctively seek out healthy minds of the living, both for nourishment and for the fleeting calm it provides to their own pain. Their mortal prey are left permanently damaged only in the rarest of instances, as the brain feeding most often actually kills the victim, their minds shattered and drained, left as a lifeless shell. This is evidenced by the ever-growing collection of withered husks you will find in their lairs. Yes, the Tisic have lairs. In fact, they are, to a degree, bound by them, the one saving grace, I guess, for lower dark explorers. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, maybe the Tisic is tethered to the mind from which it was born, and perhaps if you killed the host, the Tisic would too find its end. Well, you are luckily not the first to think of that, and more than a few adventurers have found out the hard way that the destruction of its host does not end the existence of the Tisic. Killing the original mind, in fact, does very little. Once born, or created, whichever horror you prefer, the Tisic is for all intents and purposes an independent creature, and they've even been known to turn on their illithid progenitors that created them. However, their freedom does have its limits, bound by the range of a psionic seal, a complex alien-like technology that the Mind Flayer creator will strategically place within a large inanimate object, most often in the heart of a well-defended illithid city, such as Orendal. This has the same intended effect as a guard dog on a long chain, turning the Tisic into a localized horror, restricting it to a defined area or zone around the psionic seal. Scholars and sages have estimated the range of this zone to be about 3 miles, but honestly, why anyone would trust the word of a surface scholar who has never stepped foot in the lower dark is beyond me, but hey man, you do you. In any event, it is also suggested that destroying the source of the abomination's genesis, that seal, is the only way to truly kill a Tisic, so good luck with breaching an entire city of Mind Flayers. Worse still, some believe that destroying a Tisic incorrectly, that is, without breaking the psionic seal first, only returns it to the subconscious, where it regenerates and grows stronger until it is torn loose once again. The Tisic comes to us courtesy of some truly alien illithid research and development. But all you have to do to kill one is destroy the seal, they say. Easy peasy. Just waltz into a Mind Flayer city and dismantle their psionic doomsday device. What could possibly go wrong? Besides, everything. But hey, at least you'll have a story to tell, assuming you survive, which statistically, well, let's not dwell on statistics. Okay, let's discuss what it takes to assume the #1 spot on a listing of the rarest and most obscure creatures of the Underdark. Well, it should obviously be rare, as are all the creatures to some degree on this list. It should also be unique and have compelling lore, while being very cryptic, obscure, and hard to find. And ideally, it would also be terrifying, since this is a list of Underdark creatures, not playful woodland fairies from the Feywild. And for my money, the ineffable horror aces that criteria. It is definitely not the most powerful creature of the lower dark. Spoiler alert, I'm already working on that list. But it doesn't need to be. It's scary, unique, and interesting, and the creature's lore is perhaps some of the most obscure on this list. Not to mention it has the icing on this horror cake of the name. Unlike the Denzelian, when you say ineffable horror, kind of feels like it should be a curse word. Yet you're allowed to say it at the dinner table or grandma's house. Ineffable. Just try it. Fun, right? Sometimes it's the simple pleasures. An aberration mainly found in the 2003 Underdark resource, along with just a few blurbs across Dungeon and Dragon magazine articles, the ineffable horror brings with it a level of visual unpleasantry that makes Mind Flayers uncomfortable, while also compelling that they consider if they are perhaps somehow related. A truly grotesque fusion of biology gives this aberration a muscular 7 to 8 foot tall frame, large leathery bat wings, and a head that looks far too similar to that of a Mind Flayer for comfort. But that's not even the worst aspect of an unholy amalgamation that looks as though the gods stitched together dissimilar terrors, facets from one too many mortal fears. Taking a cue perhaps from the Tomb Tapper, the real ineffable part of this horror is found in its gaping abdomen, where instead of a solid torso with maybe a 6 or 8 pack to flex, we're greeted with what appears to be the creature's external digestive tract. Gross? No doubt, but that alone might just indicate that the creature is not long for this world, experiencing its own death rattle. And that might be the case if not for the fact that whatever you want to call this mass of squirming tentacles disguised as intestines, they are in fact part of its unnatural biological arsenal, able to lash out and coil their victims. And I have no doubt that some of their prey just stare in stunned horror as these snake-like tentacles emerge from the creature's gaping stomach to ensnare their next blood meal. Once tangled in this crimson embrace, there are only seconds before those writhing tentacles pierce the flesh of the prey and then begin to drain the life force in a manner that would make a vampire seethe with jealousy. Ineffable horrors are said to stalk the deep middle dark and lower dark. While holding a modest 3rd edition challenge rating of 5, in a modern 5e conversion, the ineffable horror would convert to something along the lines of a barbed devil, with slightly over 100 hit points and a little bump in the AC to 16 or so due to their ability to fly. However, any concern or perceived weakness is mitigated by the unholy abominations one might easily mistake for a fiend, most often hunting in large packs of up to 12, called murders, with apologies to kinkus and crows everywhere. Their behavior can probably best be summarized as the marauding type. Like a Clive Barker-infused version of Genghis Khan, the ineffable horrors do not claim territory in any traditional sense. Instead, they are semi-nomadic, wandering across the descending Underdark, seeking out cavern settlements, traveling encampments, small villages, and expedition groups, then killing, draining really, everything in their path, drinking their fill and leaving empty, crimson-stained ground in their wake. Despite all I have shared, due to their obscurity in the lore, there is still much we do not know. We know nothing of their origin and only scant more about their life cycle. For example, why are they so rare, despite traveling in such large, concentrated packs? Their efficient hunting style seems incompatible with their scarcity. The lore has no real answers, but I will offer my own thoughts. What we do know of their behavior seems to suggest that they are, on a much smaller scale, a bit like locusts. They overwhelm an area, feeding on the land, or in their case the living, and then leave only a barren wasteland behind them. Perhaps these creatures are rare because their existence is simply unsustainable. They feed too quickly, too aggressively, their numbers forced to find an equilibrium based on the availability of resources, if you will excuse my callous academic term for such a horror. The fact is, if the ineffable horrors bred like other creatures and had unlimited sustenance, the Underdark would likely be nothing more than an endless graveyard of withered husks. Perhaps this is their only mercy. Their reproductive cycle remains unknown, and scholars debate whether they even can reproduce in any traditional sense, as no females have ever been seen or documented. Some even posit that their numbers are finite and will only decline until they die out as a species. Theories put forth include creations from the outer planes, or their existence as the vermin of the far realm, disposed into the Underdark like their own dumping ground. However, the theory that seems to be gaining traction would not only shed some light on their origin, but also explain their striking facial similarities to the illithid. It's called the failed seramorph theory, and it claims that the ineffable horrors are the result of mind flayers' experiments gone awry. Big surprise. Gadokro or Dretch demons empowered through seramorphosis. Or go the other way, perhaps a failed experiment with a Nalfeshni. What they were hardly matters. Warped experiments of the illithid, mind flayers attempting to make powerful thralls. But somehow the illithid tadpole implants were rejected by their hosts, too strong, too resilient, or a litany of other reasons why experiments fail, with the mind flayers left to just abandon their mistakes. Regardless, the ineffable horror claims its rightful, if stomach-churning, pun fully intended, crown in this top 5. But we are not quite done. As promised, I have one more creature of the night below that is both deserving of an honorable mention as well as its own lore profile. And all I ask for this bonus content is to take the nanosecond required to like, subscribe, and enable notifications, and maybe later check out my Patreon and its growing library of art and world-building resources. You can join for free, and links are below, along with access to our channel Discord and Buy Me a Coffee donations. Thank you. See, that wasn't so bad. And now, your well-deserved reward. So there are many more rare and obscure Underdark creatures that could have, perhaps even should have, made this list. Of the nearly 100 Underdark creatures I researched extensively, there are easily between 20 and 30 that could be justified as rare and obscure. And that is the inherent problem with any best of list, the ones you have to leave off. The Fairlock, the Vril, the Rackspawn, and of course the Ferrum all deserve a place on this list, especially the Ferrum, but worry not, as I have plans for each and quite a few more in future lists. But before we close out this particular top 5 and you share your own agreements, disagreements, and WTF moments, there is an honorable mention that not only deserves to be included in this category of rare Underdark creatures, but is so obscure, so unknown by most, that this is likely the only list where it can be included, and why it bumped the Ferrum to a later discovery. And that creature is called the Vadianoi, a name taken from the real-world Slavic folklore that tells of a similar watery spirit that takes the form of an amphibious, Anurian, or frog-like creature. The word itself, Vadianoi, being roughly translated to "he from the water." This amphibious subterranean stalker may have just missed out cracking our top 5, but in the spirit of respecting one's elders, has earned my honorable mention. The Vadianoi reside among the elder statesmen of creature lore, being introduced over 44 years ago in the Fiend Folio for the very first edition of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons in 1981. This hulking creature of dark waters then lay dormant for almost a decade until it resurfaced in the 1990 Old Empires resource. Since then, the Vadianoi has found its way into 1993's Monster Manual for the 2nd edition, as well as the previously mentioned Secrets of the Lamp adventure module from that same year, another adventure in Dragon number 250, and the Sea of Fallen Stars campaign setting in 1999. Though its presence in later editions has certainly waned, having last appeared ever so briefly in the Monster Manual for 3.5, it remains a unique and obscure relic of the Underdark's past, and there is no reason to believe this Silentian stalker is not patrolling the Underdark's many shoals at this very moment. Vadianoi have been known to inhabit the Bay of Chisinta, the Ghostmere of Alcanul, and even the trenches of the Vilhan Reach. And while they are able to survive in both fresh and salt water, their preferred habitat is found in the dark sunken caverns, hidden lakes, and subterranean seas of the Underdark. Their lairs consist of crude hollows and caves carved into stone near or just beneath the surface of large bodies of water, and are easily identified by the scattered bones of the drowned and the wreckage of ill-fated vessels that were unlucky enough to navigate near their lairs. Deep-dwelling explorers of the Underdark should be especially wary around waters near geothermally heated areas where hydrothermal vents spew noxious steamy fumes into the depths, or near the shoals of the sunless lakes and seas. These are the primordial ecosystems in which their species thrives. And with the exception of the Kraken and Aboleth of the night below, they play the role of apex predators in these environments. The in-game origins of the Vadianoi are, in my opinion, murkier than the lore actually claims. To the eyes of anyone that did not consult the lore previously, it only takes one glance to visually suggest that these amphibious creatures surely trace their lineage all the way back to the ancient bloodlines of the Batraki, one of the 3 original creator races that I've previously covered on this channel. That said, the official first edition lore clearly suggests otherwise, claiming the Vadianoi share their ancestry with that of the Umberhulk. And judging from their traits and characteristics, I can certainly see some shared similarities, but personally, I still have some questions. The Vadianoi do have the same powerful build and brute strength, but their tough frog-like hide looks quite different from that of the Umberhulk's chitinous insect-like plate armor. However, the one unmistakable trait that proves the strongest credibility to the official lore is found in the massive mandibles that each possess. And for the toad-like Vadianoi, those sharp mandibles are said capable of snapping through clamshells like you or I crack an overpriced egg. They stand in excess of 10 feet tall, actually making them a bit bigger than your typical Umber Hulk. And while the Umber Hulk is primarily a land creature, the Vodyanoi, on the other hand, while quite capable of land movement, being amphibious, prefer the water where their bulky frames move with a surprising level of alacrity. The lore provides no definitive word on if the Vodyanoi enjoy the flesh of humanoids with the same delight as Umber Hulks, but I would err on the side of caution here and just not ask. So yes, just take the Umber Hulk, drown it until it's waterlogged, then replace the beetle armor with the tough, slick green mottled hide of the giant frog monster. Then give it web claws for mobility in its watery habitat, as well as for dragging their screaming prey down into the cold, crushing dark depths, and I think we have a match. Look, I don't doubt the official lore here, but I am unofficially positing that two things can both be true at the same time. This thing, having Batraki blood coursing through its veins, is a hill I would die on. Metaphorically, of course. I mean, all it takes is one lonely Batraki meeting another lonely Umber Hulk at some point over 30 plus millennia, not a stretch, and presto, instant evolution gone horribly wrong, and gifting or cursing our world with the Vodyanoi. Turning to their role in the Underdark ecology, as predators, the Vodyanoi are silent hunters, just as likely to ambush as openly assault. They are patient. They watch with eyes that are bulbous, alien, and able to see perfectly in the pitch-black depths where they wait, just under the water's surface for their prey, very crocodile-like. And worse still, when in their aquatic habitat, they actually possess the ability to summon a small group of writhing electric eels, rising from the depths to weaponize the water around them in the most literally, shockingly effective sense. One thing we have not touched on yet is the Vodyanoi's intelligence. They're not curing cancer anytime soon, but they do meet the definition of an intelligent creature, to the point they might be reasoned with or able to strike bargains. Our evidence of this can be found in the lore that suggests the Vodyanoi have formed past alliances to meet their own self-serving interests, greed and desire being a common trait among the intelligent. Some first edition scholars have claimed Vodyanoi have served capricious water genies as amphibious enforcers. Others tell of darker pacts, with them acting as executioners and guardians for deep-dwelling cults. And there exists substantial evidential lore supporting the claim that the vast majority of Vodyanoi worship an obscure, nearly forgotten deity named Panzuriel. This ancient intermediate sea god of the 2nd and 3rd edition was, even at his peak, still fairly obscure, with Umberly, of course, being the preeminent evil sea god of the Forgotten Realms. Nonetheless, Panzuriel was nearly destroyed millennia ago before being driven from the material plane completely. However, rumors suggest that in recent times, thanks to the worship of the Vodyanoi, who routinely drag their sacrificial offerings to their watery graves in his name, have received his blessings. Heck if I know or want to know what the blessing of a nearly forgotten drowned god actually entails. Regardless, thanks to their efforts, along with those of some rebellious factions of Marrow and Sahuagin, who choose not to worship their own de facto deities such as Demigorgon and Sekolah, respectively, Panzuriel is said to have emerged from its abyssal exile, making inroads in the Underdark and other deep unknowns on Toril, while slowly clawing back at least some of those intermediate powers. And that is the Vodyanoi, and it's deserving honorable mention, mostly because my OCD wouldn't let me leave it off the top 5, and now I'm trying to justify its inclusion in this video. But hey, super rare frog hulk summoning electric eels. It's gotta be worth something. The Ferrum will just have to find its spotlight elsewhere. But the odds of any top 5 list of anything finding 100% agreement among its audience is 0.0. So tell me where you think I missed the mark, and while you're at it, leave a comment on what other top 5 Underdark related or anything in the Forgotten Realms you'd like to see next. Take care, my friends.